What's good, everybody? Today we have two young guys who are building conversational AI for sales teams, and they're backed by Coastal Ventures with millions of dollars. The kicker, they built their own model. Next up, we have two twins at the age of 27 who've raised over $50 million to build Stripe for insurance. And let me remind you what you're listening to. My name is Michael Zakand. I'm joined by my co-founder and co-host Simran Sandhu, and this is our future podcast, the entrepreneurship show for young people. We study the most successful up-and-coming young founders and study their business models and ship out their insights so that you can apply them to your own businesses. And Simmy and I have a little bit of experience. We exited our media company to Morning Brew last January, and now we get to host this awesome podcast. So without further ado, let's dive into the first story. And I'm waiting for the boy Simmy Sandhu to hit me with that alley-oop.
Let's do it. Let's bring the juice. So for the first story today, we've got these two guys, Trevor Lee and Zheng Li. They've started a company called Myko AI, and they've raised $2.7 million from investors like Coastal Ventures to create conversational AI for sales teams. So the way it works is that their platform will plug into your Salesforce, Slack, or Teams channels, and then you can get data and draw insights from anything that you would need. So for example, you could ask it to give you your average deal size by region for the past 3 years, or something like who are my best performing reps based on certain metrics or KPIs that you would want to analyze. But where I think this gets interesting is if they can give you actionable tactics or things you should do based on trends that the platform sees, like tell me what accounts have the best opportunity to upsell or cross-sell and how should I target them? Because I believe the challenge is that a lot of database platforms, they can give you analytics, they can give you reports, but then people are kind of like, what do I do with this information? So I think if they can not only surface those insights, but tell you what you should do and eventually do those things for you, there's probably going to be a huge opportunity here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the big things when we're talking to Trevor is like they built their own model for this. And I think they chose a narrow enough use case wherein there's a limited set of terms and a limited number of keywords that really define the core data of the sales category, right?
Sure.
So with Myko, he essentially told us that he locked himself in his room, right? And like he just started waxing lyrical. Like he probably sounded like, you know, that guy who sits next to you in the office who's an absolute douche and is like, yeah, quarter pipeline. How did we do on the end of sales revenue cycle? And like just stuff like just the buzzwords. And he's essentially documented all of the sales language. So he was able to teach this AI to understand, you know, exactly how to surface the key metrics that define a healthy revenue organization.
Totally. In the beginning, he had to do the things that didn't scale, right? So he came up with 100 questions manually, and then he gave it to Zheng. And what's fascinating about Zheng is like, he is this AI wizard and had worked at NVIDIA, right? So that was kind of the cool thing about their relationship is you got Trevor, who's the Wall Street guy, and then you've got Zheng, the AI expert. And so he essentially crafted this list and he was like, all right, Zheng, go crazy from here. Take this list, train the model, and let's go run with it. But why I think creating your own model is so important in this case is that if you're selling to enterprise companies, the most important thing is that, you know, there's a safety component and there's a compliance component to it, right? They may not want to put private sensitive information into OpenAI or some of these other models, right? But if they can get something that's private, something that they know isn't going to be shared to, I don't know, some bigger platform that may use it for a nefarious purpose, there is a lot of value in that. And so I'm going to take the other side of this, which is the model is actually more important from a privacy standpoint and selling into big companies.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really valid point. I think privacy is one major aspect. I also think dependence is also another one, right? Like OpenAI ships an update and like every venture-backed founder at YC just like shits their pants because Sam Altman is effectively like destroying their business, like on the spot. Like it's like seeing a press release about the next world war in their eyes, right? It's like it's over.
Yeah.
So I
Definitely
think that's an advantage.
for sure. For sure. Definitely, there's a lot of platform risk. I mean, something else I would say is what I've noticed about the sales and marketing tech space in specific is that you don't actually have great talent. Maybe that's changed in the past year or two, but you haven't had great engineering talent focused on developing products in the space. And so typically what you've seen is it's a very big sales game, right? It's sales tech
Mm,
created by salespeople leveraging offshore labor, or leveraging, maybe their buddies that they have, and then they'll try to
yeah.
just like turn it into a sales game, and grow that way. But now what you're seeing is all of this Silicon Valley interest, and it's these people raising $10 million, $15 million, attacking the space that typically was being done by just pure hustle and grit.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, we're actually going to come up with an innovative solution here, and we're just going to like sell the shit out of this to these companies because they're going to take something that is just way better over like something that maybe they had just bought because it was just better than nothing, right? It was it helped, but maybe it didn't solve all their problems.
Dude, if engineers were salespeople, we would have had these products like 10 years ago because like the way sales works is it's like a lot of monotony. It's a lot of like mundane, boring
For
tasks.
sure.
And the propensity of a sales guy to become a software founder is obviously much lower than an engineer becoming a software founder, right? So I don't know, with the emergence of AI and how it's, like becoming easier to enter a space with a model, and just because querying a dashboard is probably the most prime use case for an AI tool, right? Like being able to just ask questions and get the data that you're looking for instead of trying to sift through various Excel sheets, documents, whatever, is going to be huge for a number of businesses, right? This is a particular focus on sales, and at the end of the day, like sales drives business, so it's a huge category. And I think the engineering talent probably hasn't been attracted to it because it's typically like these problems that don't seem that big to like someone from an engineering background. It's like,
Yeah, it's not
why
life
why
changing
am I
work, but
manually messaging people on
totally.
LinkedIn? And then engineers
Yeah.
like, that's so dumb. Like you could
Yeah.
do that in 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Um, but really, it's the most ROI linked category of business, right? So
For
it makes a
sure.
lot of sense to build in the space.
I think a lot of top talent is they almost think of themselves as big dreamers, right? They want to go
Yeah,
tackle the most challenging problems. And I actually saw something very funny, which was it's harder to convince a smart person to work on an easy problem versus solving a very hard problem. And I was like, wow,
yeah,
that's actually so true because it almost feels like it's beneath them. Now, what I found interesting about this platform is I think they were smart to embed it in their workflows. And what I mean in this context is they're not building a new CRM, right? They're using what you're already the channels that you're already using within your team, right? So they're using
yeah.
Salesforce, they're using Slack, they're using Teams, and they're like, let's just pull from there, right? We're not going to force you to use our unique system or our unique CRM. Now, I know this is like there's pros and cons here. I think it's pros from the standpoint that I think it can get you a lot of adoption very early and it can get you off the ground. But when I talk to a lot of my software friends who are building companies in the space, something they talk a lot about is the importance of building a source of record. And you want to be the source of record. And so, what does that mean, right? It's kind of a flashy, buzzy term. But when you think about a CRM, that is a source of record. And in this case, it means like the one the one integrated source of truth, right, for your whole
Mhm.
team, right? So if you're looking for data or about your clients, if you're looking for data on numbers, it is kind of like this aggregate source of information. And that is where the value is created. If you can get all the teams in an organization pulling back to Monday.com, pulling back to Salesforce to use this one platform for whatever purpose they need within the company, that's where the value is created. So it seems like they're not going in that direction. They're going the opposite because where there is opportunity, naturally it's going to get very competitive. So what you're seeing right now are tons of people are trying to create CRMs because they want to be the source of record, but that's a red ocean. So they don't want to play there. They want to play in the other areas where people aren't putting as much attention to. And they're just like, we're just going to be the best data provider. We're not going to be the place where you're storing all the data. We'll just give you the best insights that we can drive.
Yeah, and if you're effectively skipping the line. You're going in front of all these big, massive software companies like Zapier, Salesforce, Slack, right? You're getting there in the front because you're querying. You're responsible for the original action, right? In the cycle of using software because you're asking a
Totally.
natural language question to query all of them at the same time. Dude, that's one way to get a good NVIDIA guy on your project. It's like Yeah, we're building a sales. No, we're not building a sales tech company to increase pipeline. We're building a source of truth. And I
Yeah.
think that would be a hard bar,
Yeah.
to get some of these
Well, that's
people.
not
And
what they're not doing though. They're not
oh, that's
building
what
a
they're
source
not
of
doing.
truth. Yeah, the
Oh,
source of
I
truth
feel like
would
they
be built.
are.
The source of truth would be building a CRM in this case, right? So it's something that all the teams are dependent on. In
Got
their
it.
case, they're not doing that. They're just like, hey, let's just integrate and let's just build an intelligence platform of sorts, right? So you can
Okay.
derive any insight that you need.
Yeah,
But I agree. That would
they're not
totally
the
be a
source.
great selling point.
They're not the source of truth, but they're the like vehicle to deliver the truth in a way, like just through that very easy natural language process.
I would say they are the vehicle to give you more insights from your source of truth, right? So you can just, like, your source of truth is just like, okay, all this information is stored in one place. Now, what the hell do I go do for it? Connect the dots for me. That's what their platform does.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. The story of how he built the model and how he just like spent a weekend just literally saying every like buzzword and term a salesperson could possibly say
For
reminds
sure.
me of the story of how Amazon Alexa was built. So when they were trying to build Alexa, they hired all these independent contractors and rented out 4 homes in the Boston metropolitan area. And they'd have people go into these bedrooms and just walk around asking questions, reading off a script to try and train this microphone, this AI, on all the kinds of ways a human asks a question and converses with an AI chatbot. They had so many people shuffling in and out of these houses over a number of weeks that the neighbors actually called the cops, thinking it was an illegal drug or prostitution ring.
No way. That's so
Um,
funny.
I don't know. I just think it's funny how to train a computer, you just have to like speak to it for a while.
Yeah.
Um, but it's good that he had the domain expertise because I think he was like the sales guy, and then his partner's the technical one. But I think another cool part of his platform is that it very focuses pretty intently on validating the data. So really like figuring out where exactly it came from. And I feel like this is a really important part of any AI model or chat interface, just like Rogo is, like we discussed last week, and that you really have to know where things come from. So when you're talking to your AE, talking to your boss, being able to really know, be like, oh, this came from this or that, right? Being able to validate what you come up with. And I think that's like a missing piece in some of these platforms like ChatGPT that are very general and aren't really showing you where something came from. And then it's also the angle of this is bespoke data. This is like specifically all the software platforms your firm is using. And it's an internal tool by all means. It's not just a general research product that you're relying on. So it's really
I
coming
think,
from
yeah,
the
I
source
think
of
that's
truth.
important. I think that's
Yeah.
important for sure. I think the thing that's even more important is they are building in the standardization here. So
Yes.
there's a lot of acronyms that are thrown in the sales world. Like, for example, building a source of record, and people are like, "What does that even mean? Like, what is that?" So they're building out this glossary of sorts, right? So it's in the platform itself, right? So as you're asking these questions, they essentially have this list here where it defines out these specific sales terms. And now they're telling you what you should be searching for, right?
Yeah.
So they're creating the rules in the space. And I think we haven't seen that in sales just yet. You see it in other
Yeah.
industries, but you get to create the rules. This is something we talked about in episode 2 of this podcast with Akshaya and what she was doing with Spellbound. And I think if you're in a position to do that, now, again, they're thinking about it in the lens of data. You can be in a good spot because there's a lot of ways you can take that further.
Well, it's interesting, right? Like the quality of AI right now depends on the quality of your questions, right? It's almost like you have to be a great interrogator to be a great analyst or a great, data miner. So being able to just tell people what to say is honestly, at this point in AI, more valuable than getting an answer to something. So I think that's really fascinating that he's been able to standardize the sheet of interview
You know what's
questions.
so funny though about what you just said?
What?
Okay, so I just had this conversation with a friend. They work at a big corporate company, and they have strict provisions. They're like, do not use ChatGPT. Like, they're like, we do not want any of our data being plugged into ChatGPT. And this is a big healthcare company. And so he's like, Simmy, what do you use AI for? Like in your day to day? And I was like, honestly, what I find myself using AI the most for is asking it to give me the right questions to assess what I'm trying to understand, right? So
Hmm.
I'm not actually looking to AI or using GPT for the sense of trying to get answers, but rather like, hey, tell me what questions I should be asking to understand this. Because I think if the inputs are right, then the outputs are naturally, if you can figure out the inputs, the outputs are naturally going to reflect that. And I find that
Right.
like when you're searching these answers, to your point, like you have to figure out what the right questions are to get the right
Yeah.
answers. And so instead, use AI to tell you what questions you should be asking. And I found that to be a much better use case for these kind of products, right? So if I have all of this sales data, I would be like, hey, listen, my goal is I'm trying to get $1 million, in ARR for this company. I have 3 sales reps. They're all doing about maybe 20K in inbound leads every single month. What questions should I be framing to them, or what questions should I be thinking about as I'm trying to get to $1 million in ARR? And let that be the guiding point, or the guiding questions that facilitate that process for you internally.
Dude, it's an unbelievable point. I think it's so prescient, and like it is just really illuminates a lot of value that these like chat interfaces can be adding. And I think Trevor's done it very well in that you want to make sure people are asking the right questions inside these organizations. And it's something that I think a lot of people don't have the muscle to do quite yet, right? Like to really like ask the right questions to these chat interfaces. I guess the next question I'd ask is like, I would assume every sales data company is working on to plug in a chat
For
or
sure.
conversational interface to their platform. This company, Myko, has a couple employees. These guys built out the model relatively quickly. They're still very early. What's stopping, a HubSpot, they already have like ChatSpot. They launched that and shipped that pretty quick, to be able to answer these questions that people have.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's extremely competitive. And I think in its current form, maybe there's not, a unique moat. That's why I think if it can get to a point where it's doing the action for you, right? That is where I think this gets interesting, right? So it's not only just like pulling those insights, but then it's acting upon them, right? So this data can study my history as like a sales leader. And then it can not only tell me, hey, Simmy, you should be doing this with your 3 sales reps, but then it actually sends out those messages and is kind of guiding it. And so you're playing like a conductor style role. You're just making sure the AI is doing what it should be doing, but you're not actually the one like telling it what to do, right? And so I think
Right.
that's where they're in a unique capacity to do it in a way that a HubSpot couldn't, right? Because for HubSpot, like their only value is the ability to do it for the HubSpot platform, right? So you're just going to be restricted in a kind of a closed space. But they're kind of a third party, so they can integrate with a bunch of these different platforms, and that's where
Yeah.
they're not restricted to one way, right? That is kind of the, I guess, the open source, equivalent here. It's like they could do this for Slack, they could do this for Salesforce, they can do it for HubSpot, they can do it for Monday.com. Whereas like these internal ones, they're only going to focus on their specific platform.
Which limits the value of the answers and the output
Totally.
tremendously. Yeah,
Totally.
I could see this company getting acquired by one of those players. I think it would be a prime, acquisition given what we talked about on past episodes of consolidation, sales tech, and wanting to own, more and more of the feature set, such as HubSpot's acquisition of Clearbit, right, which enriches data, generally, and now it's going to be just, owned by HubSpot. So, um,
Yeah, for sure.
I think it would be a great acquisition target for sure.
I think something relevant to this that I actually wanted to get your thought on, which was, dude, it's crazy. I'm talked to a lot of people in marketing tech, talked to a lot of people in sales tech, and a lot of them are just being scrappy. They're trying to bootstrap these companies, and you'll talk to them and be like, "Hey, wow, like this is a really good idea. I'm glad you're working on this." And they're like, "Yeah, it is a good idea, but like there's like 10 companies right now in Silicon Valley that have all raised $10 million to go work on the same thing." And they're like, "I'm in too deep and now I don't know what to do." They're like, I don't want to raise money because that's going to put me on the VC treadmill, but I can't compete with these people. And everyone is targeting this space. Like I have a few month advantage on them that I just know more about the space and I've been working on the problem a little bit longer, but they can buy their way in, right? By just hiring the right people. And I was like, dude, how do you compete? Like, do you think that if you're building in software, unless you raise money, it's a really like catch-22 situation, right? Because like multiples will come down. Software is not that competitive. And so like building a bootstrap business is very hard because someone will raise money to go do what you're doing, and it's kind of like a race to the bottom, right? Like it's like they're just gonna like put in so much money. The value is gonna get like kind of distorted to some extent. Like it's just gonna decrease and decrease, and you as the bootstrapping person can't really compete.
Yeah. I'd say the flip side to that is I was talking to this software engineer who left his AI company, um, because he said that the product they were building, I think it was like a, I don't know, deep fake for creators, AI avatar for creators. They said that they were in, up Shit's Creek because there was some guy in San Francisco who had built the exact same product by himself, right? One employee, and was doing like a million, 2 million a year. And they had raised millions of dollars and they weren't getting like anywhere close. It was like they had raised way too much money to do something that like one guy could theoretically be doing. And I think it's different with different ideas and different categories, but I think there's also a flip side in that these companies are raising a ton of money to do something that's like probably could be pulled off by one individual person.
Sure, I would agree with that in the sense that like this person may nail product all by themselves and they may not need 10 other engineers to work with to get the same product out. But if you think about it, it's like the old saying, which is like first time founders think about products, second time founders think about distribution.
Distribution,
And
yeah.
that is more important, right? Like yes, it is easier to build the product, and that's scary if you did raise a lot of money to know that some dude named John in Silicon Valley just like built this out of his dorm, but you still got to sell it to people and you still got to
Yeah.
nail customer service. So that's where I'm saying like that's where people are going to deploy the money. How do you compete with that?
Yeah, it's very true. Like, how do you get to scale? And I think that's like, how do you actually build one of these software businesses to 100 million, 200 million, 300 million ARR? I think you need that quotient of huge teams, boots on the ground to go and push this down everyone's throat.
Yeah,
Maybe this is a good segue into our next story then.
let's do it.
So speaking of what you just said, right? It's a very competitive industry. Something about the guys I'm talking about. They're VCs. They're backed by Founders Fund, Khosla as well. They've raised again over $50 million, and the VCs have been saying like nobody else is looking at this category. So let me tell you about Michael and Matthew Vega Sands. They were Babson students, and they started a car sharing startup for college students. Right. Definitely something that's been attempted by many different businesses, and they had some success right off the bat. But obviously, it's hard. It's a hard space, right? Physical assets, damage, whatever. College students giving them a car. There's a reason why rental car companies won't do that. So they actually realized that the biggest value in what they were building was an insurance product. They had built an insurance infrastructure to be able to insure each driver, but only for the allotment and period of time that they were using this asset fractionally. And they started having all these other rental companies be like, oh, we'd love to use your software. So they pivoted the business into what is now Lula. And Lula, you can think of it as Stripe for insurance. Right now, every company that essentially leases out, rents out assets to other people has to essentially purchase these annual insurance premiums and somehow make a calculation of how many users they're going to have per year. And what Lula will do is allow them to essentially offer at checkout, or just integrated through their platform, insurance, and they have their own underwriting model, risk assessment, et cetera. And they're working specifically right now with car sharing companies, car rental businesses, trucking companies. And it's really interesting. What the founder was saying was insurance companies have never understood like how to insure and have never built around insuring these episodic incidents, right? Of I'm going to rent an asset for 3 days. This is who I am. This is my background. And this is what kind of the risk profile should be in the payment for insurance. So they want to end up getting into more and more businesses, right? Renting vehicles is just one part of the insurance market. If you could think about applying this to many businesses, for example, insuring cargo, they want to get into logistics. They want to get into, potentially like leasing machinery, for example. So there's a ton of opportunity for them, and the business has grown like gangbusters. They raised this round in August of 2023. They said they're on path to doing 100 million ARR in the next 3 to 4 quarters. So they're clearly doing tens of millions of revenue, and their customer base has exploded. They're serving over 5,000 businesses right now.
Wow.
So just an example of a company that really had amazing metrics, clearly solving a huge problem that other startups weren't going after, and has now got itself in position to scale up through Series B, maybe successive rounds. They have the data, and they were able to 20x their valuation between 2021 and 2023, which is not something a lot of these businesses have been able to do. They didn't take a down round. They were able to
No,
keep growing it.
that's cool. How long has this business been around?
They started it in 2020.
Okay, so
Couple
probably
of
4
years.
years. Yeah, three,
Yeah.
4 years. Let me ask you this. What do you think about moving into these other product lines? So it sounds like this has been a horizontal. They're trying to ensure a bunch of different stuff. Do you agree with that approach here?
So right now they're focused specifically on they're serving 5,000 car sharing, car rental, trucking businesses with this insurance product. I think they understand deeply, right? Like this particular asset class of like vehicles. I think that's something that they understand. But I think the market size is just so much bigger to get into these other categories. Um, so yeah, I mean, I would agree that like that's the narrative they need to have to like raise successive venture rounds is to like expand into new industries. But it's clearly having like a lot of success with what they're doing right now. I don't know what exactly the roadmap is, but it sounds like a pretty logical move to me.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think this is a cool business. It feels a little similar to what we covered last week. With the kind of the Stripe analogy a little bit. I don't know if I would use this though, to be honest with you. Like I don't know if it's like a big enough problem for me as an individual consumer when like I get rental cars.
It's not a problem for you, but it's a problem for these businesses. For example, they work with trucking fleets. And what is very interesting is trucking companies have to pay 365 days a year for coverage when many of these small trucking businesses only have their truck on the road for a couple days a week. So these drivers have to be insured, 24/7, but not in these specific instances when their car is actually active. So if you think about this idea, right, of the way, I don't know, maybe you could say the sharing economy is growing, right? Where people are like with Tulu, we talked about are leasing and borrowing assets instead of actually owning them outright. And it's a different equation than when you pay for car insurance and you own the vehicle and you use it all the time and you just have this annual policy versus these businesses that obviously spend huge amounts of money on insurance premiums, right? And
I
now
see.
they only have to use them when they're like active, right? So they're able to make a much more efficient and targeted approach to their insurance, which will save money across the board. So it's definitely a huge expense for these rental companies. And think about how many different industries, operate on borrowed assets or rentals or, whatever it is. So I think it really is a huge market. And each of these companies, like, think about it, like each of these companies spending all this copious time going out and finding policies, finding insurers, right? They all have their own internal data. It's just like Stripe makes it more efficient and they have their own infrastructure for any company to go out and accept payments. And it's the same way with this company, enabling any of these businesses to offer an insurance product to their customers.
Yeah, for sure, man. I think just like what I was saying earlier, there's definitely a lot of similarities between this company and Slope. I mean, around creditworthiness, being able to provide a solution as like you're going towards the end of the payment process, integrating with these companies. Where do you think you could replicate this model in other industries, right? So if they're tackling this in, say, rental cars and maybe trucks, and they've kind of got automotive down, where else do you think maybe someone listening to this or 24, 25 years old could go raise money and go do this?
The way I would apply this to another kind of business is figuring out, okay, where can I upsell consumers in a checkout process to where it's not make or break that I have to have an insurance policy for these things like behind the scenes for my business, but how can I tap into a consumer's like mindset that they absolutely should be insuring this asset and then be able to use some kind of API like, Lula has built to customize an insurance plan for that particular buyer, and then giving them
Yeah.
that peace of mind, which could push them over the edge to make the purchase. If you look at when you book a flight, right? That's another one that is an insurable asset. They're always trying to upsell you to like Allianz, right? They're like, oh, protect this flight, whatever. And I think like that, adding it to checkout in some way, this insurance product could be a valuable play.
So I think this is really interesting because I wonder if you can get creative with the business model itself. So when I think about my own experience, when it comes to, to your same example of trying to book a flight and getting that option on whether or not I want to insure it, I usually will press no for two reasons, right? One is like friction. I have to go press another button and then like it's going to come up with some other pop up that I got to deal with. So I'm just like, screw this. And second is like the cost. So I wonder if maybe it like defaulted to where there is maybe some kind of discount that you get for that you get by auto selecting this insurance option, right? Maybe it's like an insurance loyalty program of some kind when it comes to like cars, flights, whatever. And it's like, if you're a member of this thing, it's automatically going to assume that you're going to go for the option with insurance on it, but you'll get like a 25% discount versus like the ones that you get from Alliance or whatever.
Dude,
right. So
I think that's super smart because for the airline, knowing that you're going to cancel is everything. For Apple, knowing your product is going to be in good shape is key because that
yeah.
entire business now operates on upgrades and returning your old phone. Like that's been a huge
Yep.
trend lately, right?
Yep.
So it's almost like these companies protecting these assets to generate more revenue for themselves by giving you this policy, and then giving the customer a reward as a result, right? Because it
Yeah.
would probably be good for Delta to have that insurance policy in place, because if their flight is canceled or something, then the Allianz is on the hook for that, right? Or whatever insurance provider. But if you can't make your trip, you're going to get some kind of recourse that you're not going to be complaining to the company for, right? And then you can feel
Totally.
more liberal to
Yeah.
actually cancel it, and instead of just not showing up to the flight, which is a missed seat for the airline.
Yeah, there's definitely some kind of consumer psychology aspect in here.
Yeah,
Like, if what you're saying is true, which is most people do not take the insurance option, well, how do you like make it so it becomes almost habitual for them, right? So anytime they do it, the default option is they're going to take the insurance, right? Like, how do
right.
you encourage that behavior? And I think if you can say
That's
something
smart.
where it's like, you're getting a deal on this, like, you're actually stupid if you don't do this, like, you're losing money somehow. And I don't know what that exactly looks like. It could be a big like ROI opportunity. Like you could just probably make a lot of money doing this, because I'm a big believer that like in today's world with how competitive things are, the innovation takes place around business models rather than like tech innovation itself, right? There's
Yeah.
not necessarily a new product line of insurance that you can offer that the big legacy companies haven't already considered. But can you offer it in a way that maybe like is cheaper to the consumer, but over time or over enough scale and volume, it actually like the balance slides in your favor?
Right. Like all of these businesses we've talked about, whether it was the guys doing the mobile home insurance or these guys, they're trying to make it better for businesses. But why is nobody thinking about making insurance better for consumers? Right.
Yeah.
Like it's just a requisite. It's just something that you have to have. Right. Like why not actually make consumers enjoy their insurance product, instead of just making it something that they have to spend more money on? Like why not give them like cash back, or like you said, like a loyalty program, that gives them like a discount to insure the product? And I think it would make sense for the companies as well. Um, so I think it's a huge missed opportunity. And that, B2B insurance is like a hot category for startups, but nobody's thinking about, for consumers, how to make it worth their time, or, worth that extra click. And I think any business that lives in like checkout would be an awesome piece of real estate. So making it, just increasing, like if you could increase, because then that insurance provider like is giving a cut to Delta or whoever you're going through the checkout process for. So the company could make money and you could save money, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so there's definitely a more like mutually beneficial model at play here,
Right.
because
And I don't know if
insurance
this is
sucks.
for sure. And I don't know if this is maybe like a great example of this, but something that I've been thinking about a lot is like the chargeback space, extremely competitive. And it's definitely a huge issue, right? Like, someone buys a product and then they, for some reason, are saying that like they didn't get it or like they're looking for a refund. Well, like for the business, it sucks. And it's actually like a very material percentage of product being sold ends up being a chargeback of some kind, whether it's digital or physical. And so, what I think could be interesting there is maybe something where it like decentivizes people from wanting to do a chargeback, right? Maybe it's like they're just going to get like a no refund thing, but they can get a certain percentage discount. Like, I wonder if
Yeah.
there's certain things along that a line where it just like could be a huge like needle driver for them. From a cost standpoint, it actually is better to give that option versus like what is taking place as status quo.
What I agree with that. And like, what if you could build out like some kind of like insurance credit score for people if they use this particular consumer insurance product across all the things they own, and then you can get better
Totally.
discounts and better rates as a result. Like there's no common thread that's tracking how well you take care of your iPhone, your car, how often you make flights, all this stuff, right? So what if there was like a way to then reward consumers who take good care of their things and therefore provide more value to these companies on the back end, right? That could be huge.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say I'm not the right person to go build this kind of business, but someone listening to this probably is. If you did it, I can already think of another business opportunity that would probably print around like the idea of insurance and quality, which is, like G2. Are you familiar with the G2 reviews?
No.
So there's like G2 reviews, and it's essentially like they put a badge on your website, right? So it's like you can essentially search up any software on there, and it will tell you reviews of it, right? So if you get this badge, it means like you're almost like validated, and it's like a certain amount of quality is assured with it, right?
Yeah.
I would create some kind of badge around this insurance thing where it's like you stamp it on, I don't know, like a Delta or some kind of rental car company or something where it's like they are certified, like they are one of these like bespoke insurance providers, and you can make a shit ton of money doing this. So if
Dude,
someone
for
decides
sure.
to innovate on this, no, the boys Mike and Simmy might come in on the back end.
Yeah. I don't know. I
Trying to ride
love,
that wave.
dude, just hitting that like sticker, like, open
Yeah.
table top 100 restaurant of the year on your storefront. Like,
So,
dude, it's funny. I just
yeah.
talked about something similar with my friend who's trying to build he's not trying to build it. It was just an idea, but he was thinking of like, how could you create a badge or just a little logo that essentially proves the photo or video you're posting to social media is true and verified and not altered by AI.
AI generated.
Like
That's a
like
great
an
idea.
AI generated badge, right? Like something like that to become the standard. To like when I'm posting a photo with my friends, like it hasn't been edited, it hasn't been altered. There's some piece of software that can realize this JPEG hasn't been fucked with, right?
I'm
And I feel like
1,000% sure someone is already working on this.
I am too.
For sure.
There's
It's
got
too
to be
clear of
so
an
many
idea.
companies that are working on verifying videos and like,
Yeah.
but that's what I'm saying. It's kind of a winners takes all market. Whoever can build the badge the quickest is going to win, right? We're FBI agents. It's all about the badges. So we'll see. I think doing something like that is super smart.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of Our Future Podcast. As always, we love doing this. Please subscribe and give us a rating wherever you listen to this, and hit us with some feedback. Last episode, we got a lot of good feedback. We're hoping to keep the momentum up. And in the meantime, we will catch you again next week with another episode of Our Future Podcast. Stay frosty.
Stay frosty, everybody. Peace.